Oh, hello. So, a lot of products that we use in our everyday lives are gendered. They're marketed to men and women separately. That goes from everything from deodorants to razors, clothing, water, somehow. This extends all the way to luxury products, such as perfumes. If you've ever walked into a Sephora, you've probably seen the strict divide between men's perfumes and women's perfumes. I think a very blatant example of this would be the Jean Paul Gaultier perfumes Classique and Le Male. It doesn't get any more clear-cut than this. One's pink, one's blue, one's got tits and a corset, the other one's got pecs and a bulge. Classique smells like flowers and vanilla and laundromats, and Le Male smells like shaving cream and lavender. Now, Jean Paul Gaultier is a big money-making brand, and there's nothing that money-making brands love more than making money off the expendable income of gay people during Pride Month. So among the 5 billion other perfumes in the Le Male line, there's also one with a rainbow on it called Le Male Pride Edition. I'm not going to get into the capitalist galaxy brain moment that is selling the same fragrance in a different bottle, because that would deserve its own video, and that's also not what this video is about. What it is about is what I found when I looked up Le Male Pride Edition on fragrantica.com. Fragrantica is a site that lets users evaluate perfumes based on their appreciation of it. It allows you to write reviews, post on forums, rate the perfumes based on radiance and notes, blah 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 blah. It's kind of a combination of Facebook, Reddit, and Rotten Tomatoes for perfume nerds. It's a bit of a cesspool, but it's my cesspool. Okay, so I look up Le Male Pride Edition on Fragrantica, and oh boy, look at those dislikes. As user Adazibby says in the reviews below, the straights are mad. So, I roll my eyes at the usual heated rhetoric of people calling each other SJWs and outright haters all over perfume, really. Until I come upon a review from a profile we'll call Karen McLaren. So, Karen says, "Spare me your assumptions about my political stance. You don't stand a chance. Family, mum and dad, kids, a man and a woman, the normal, natural way. If I have to explain what normal is, you are a lost cause." Whoa. That's a lot of emotion for Le Male Pride Edition. So I get curious, as I do. I click on a profile, and I'm not one to comment on people's perfume taste, so I'm just going to leave this here. Anyway, in her profile description, she says she's a French expat living in Canada, a mother of 4 with 4 sweet grandkids, hence a woman of a certain age. Toward the end of her profile description, she says, and I quote, "The new trend of gender-bender perfumes is kind of strange to me. Where on earth does it come from, I wonder? I don't buy it. I am so tired of people saying fragrances don't have a gender. They most certainly do." Okay. So I move on to her reviews, and it's, "Gaultier is gay and promoting his lifestyle through his brand. No rocket science. When will we see a perfume celebrating normalcy and family values, I wonder? Probably never. I don't get why it's compared to a men's cologne, and the gender propaganda is always as rubbish. It is utterly feminine. I dislike anything unisex. It smells feminine. Sorry, modern dandy, but this is for women. Go explore the masculine Chanel scents. Now there isn't anything unisex about it. Why on earth are all perfumes labeled unisex nowadays?" She's a lot, okay? She's a lot. I mean, based on all the dislikes that we saw in the Male Pride Edition, Karen isn't in a bubble. There's people who agree with her, but let's be generous here. Let's say that Karen is out of the loop. She just doesn't know. She's from another generation. She's from another time. She's confused. Poor baby. So let's inform her. Let's explore the issue of whether perfumes have a gender. So before we start, I want to note that in a Statista survey from 2018, from a sample base of 1,039 US consumers aged 18 to 65, it was found that the majority of LVMH products, so that includes perfumes by Chanel, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, Guerlain, The majority of these products are consumed by women aged 18 to 29. So that means that they are the major target of these companies. They're the ones who they're going to be marketing to. Karen, who from what we've seen is probably in the older contingent, is no longer their target. They are no longer trying to please her age group. They're aiming at a younger, more gender-fluid demographic. Karen is stung by a changing world. She hates the idea of a perfume being genderless. Let's explore that today. Do perfumes have a gender? I'm going to be trying to find some sort of answer to that question in this video. And while I do that, I'm gonna be getting in drag. Why? Because I fucking can. Also, it's my birthday. So, Karen sees this development of so-called gender-bent perfumes as being recent. People are marketing perfumes to everyone except men and women because they hate her specifically. Let's get the most basic straw man argument out of the way, which is that, fragrance ingredients, nominally plants, don't have genders. They reproduce asexually. A jasmine flower doesn't really have any use for vulva. A vetiver root doesn't really know what a penis is. People are going to like the smells of these things, regardless of what genitalia they have. But that kind of reasoning won't really work with someone like Karen. She wants history, she wants facts.
And facts don't care about your feelings.
So let's take it all the way back. Not quite to the very first perfumes, but rather to where perfumes as we conceive them today really began. The Middle East. Now, in the Shiraz Plateau, in a territory called Oman, there was a place called Muscat, where they were making complex fragrances already from about the 9th century AD. Back when, as Luca Turin would say, people in Europe were washing about once a year. The Oman territory was known, and still is known, for frankincense. And they also began distilling oud wood in that period, which, that thing that's everywhere these days. And most materials were used to create attars, which means perfumes for personal use. These perfumes were used by men and women pretty indiscriminately. Even today, oud attars are considered relatively unisex. Not sure Karen would approve. Furthermore, perfumes with prominent notes of jasmine and rose were considered to be typically masculine perfumes, whilst a lot of perfumes that would smell quote-unquote masculine to Western sensibilities were considered feminine, with heavy notes of wood and resins and smoke. Not sure Karen would approve of that either. This makeup is a disaster, and yet I am still gorgeous. It's a curse, really. But maybe these considerations are a bit too relative for Karen. After all, this all happened long ago, in the land of the infidels. What about us? What about true Western civilization, Western industrialization, the Belle Époque, when mass fragrance is truly formed? What about it? The late 1800s is where perfumes start being marketed not just as, the luxury of the elite or a small part of like a health and cleanliness regimen, but they start being actual consumer goods, a luxury product for the masses. We have a new consumer base in the form of bourgeoisie. They've got money to spend. The Industrial Revolution is cracking. We're finding all sorts of new synthetic molecules that smell great and make producing perfumes way cheaper. Let's do this. Let's make some mass market perfumes. The legendary house of Germaine, of course, is among the first to truly make gangbusters on this whole trend, along with the likes of Coty and Aubignon. Coty is a real OG, but, story for another time. And one of their biggest, most era-defining hits was 1889's Jicky. Now, I'm not going to gush about Jicky because everything's already been said about it. It's one of Guerlain's absolute masterpieces. And everyone at the time realized that it was a huge success. And though it was marketed to women, it's not so damn good that men started wearing it too. To a certain extent, it was the perfect dandy perfume. Fresh, sweet, cheeky, powdery, creamy. A lot of men have worn Jicky ever since. So clearly it doesn't quite matter who perfumes are marketed to. If people like the smell of the damn thing, they're gonna wear it. At this point, we're in a state of complete anarchy for Karen. Men are stealing ladies' perfumes, cats and dogs are sleeping together, mass hysteria. What are the girls doing? For women, style is skewing in new and interesting directions. Women are taking cues from the dandies, fashion houses like Chanel are realizing this and adding so-called masculine traits to their outfits, and perfume houses realize this too. In 1925 we have the arrival of a perfume called Le Dandy. The Dandy by Orsay. This is the advertisement for it. And this perfume was intended for women. And it was a huge hit. Ruh-roh! Okay, these nails aren't as bad as I was expecting, but they are still kind of hideous. Now, Karen, I hear you. That was the opium-stained Belle Epoque and the debauched Roaring Twenties. What about society as we know it finally setting in and giving us some respite from these effeminate dandies and whorish flappers? Let's get into the 20th century for real. And let's start with one of the most iconic perfumers of all time, Germaine Cellier. So, Germaine Cellier barrels in after the war and gives us arguably two of the most influential and iconic perfumes of all time, 1947's Vent Vert and 1948's Fracas. Vent Vert was worn by the likes of Brigitte Bardot and Greta Garbo. Fracas in particular has quite the feminine diva status. What could be more perfect? Let's get into Miss Germaine Cellier for a second. So Germaine Cellier was known for a rather masculine, butch style, and her perfumes, a lot of them, were indeed that, butch. Her 1944 feminine perfume, Bondy, was an incredibly bitter, dark, leathery perfume that definitely set the scene for things like Aramis and Antios, famous masculines. And Germaine Cellier claimed, and I'm not paraphrasing here, that Bondy was dedicated to the dykes. Ooh, Karen, the lezzies are coming for you, bitch! In fact, Miss Cellier was allegedly a lesbian, or at the very least, bisexual. And though Fracas is known as perfume, it was actually dedicated by her to Edwige Feuillère, and more generally, to the femmes. There's also weird reports of her, like, taking the undergarments away from models at the end of runways and sniffing them to get the best of their femininity. I don't know. Thus, oh dear, one of the most influential perfumers of all time is a crazy, deranged, gender-bending lesbian. But Karen doesn't care about that. She doesn't wear Robert Piquet. She wears Dior. She wears Yves Saint Laurent. A lot of Yves Saint Laurent. Let's get into Yves. YSL. Needless to say, he was one of the gayest men who ever lived, but he was also a fucking fashion visionary. In many ways, he was ahead of his time, but most notably, he was very innovative for introducing the idea of tuxedos for women. So the garment, also called a smoking in French, was mostly for men. I mean, it had been worn by some queer icons like, Marlene Dietrich, but didn't really go mainstream until Yves Saint Laurent comes along. Quoting from the Yves Saint Laurent Museum website, in his autumn-winter 1966 collection, Yves Saint Laurent introduced his most iconic piece, the tuxedo. This garment, which was meant to be worn in a smoking room to protect one's clothing from the smell of cigars, was originally reserved only for men. Saint Laurent's tuxedo, however, was not an exact copy of the men's tuxedo. He used the same codes but adapted it to the female body. Quoting Yves Saint Laurent himself, "For a woman, the tuxedo is an indispensable garment, in which she will always feel in style, for it is a stylish garment, and not a fashionable garment. Fashions fade. Style is eternal." Ooh, damn! Well, goddamn indeed, seems like gender bending is at the heart of your favorite perfume company, Karen, and it has been ever since 1966. But what Karen wants to know is, why? Why, God, why are they bombarding us with this barrage of unisex bullshit? And in fact, where does the unisex trend in perfumery really take off? Here's a hint. It's not new. This is not a recent development. In fact, one of the most well-known and successful unisex perfumes of all time, Calvin Klein's One, came out in 1994. It's almost 30 years to get used to the idea, you know? And beyond that, many designers were making a point of exploring genderlessness at that time, especially the Japanese designers. I mean, Yohji Yamamoto with his very unisex mod style, Issey Miyake had his very avant-garde stylings, and then that translated to his iconic perfumes. Kenzo had crazy layering and use of colors and shapes. R.I.P. Kenzo Takada, by the way, who was also gay.
Another one.
Rei Kawakubo, especially, my girl Rei, was stretching herself beyond what could even be considered clothing at the time, actively subverting gender expectations, alienating her work from gender or even the human form, for fuck's sake. And this was actively integrated into her perfumes, her endlessly imitated line of Comme des Garçons, which were always intended to be unisex and always have been. They've always been a genderless perfume artistic creation, and they are to this very day. So what is good, Karen? What the fuck is up? You think you're better than Rei Kawakubo? Is that it? None of us are. None of us. Only she could pull off that bob, sweetheart, okay? She's the only one who could pull off that bob, and she's the only one who ever will. And I stand by that. Let's go back to that survey for a second. It doesn't need to be restated that the demographic currently targeted by perfume companies has by and large a very different concept of gender compared to the previous generations. There's more fluidity, there's fewer guidelines. Of course, trends still exist. Undoubtedly, they always will. But the line between masculine and feminine has definitely been blurred in favor of freedom of personal expression, freedom of personal taste, style, just a more liberated sense of self. The fact that multinational companies are kowtowing to this new status quo, to this gender-bent society, that's not the point here. The point is that smell is just a question of taste. People are only going to be constrained by societal pressures up to a certain point. If they find something they like, they're going to wear it. It doesn't matter who it's marketed to, it doesn't matter who it's supposed to be for. And now our products are just starting to reflect that with this whole unisex thing. And that is progress. It's marginal. I know, it's teeny tiny, it's very niche, it's not that important, but at least it is progress. It is something. It does make the world an easier place to live in. At this point, my issue is this. What do you do? What do you do when you're just trying to enjoy a perfume? Just a fragrance. Literal hot air. Just straight up, just this. You're just trying to enjoy perfume, right? And you still have to get bombarded by a person like Karen going off on one of hers and saying something along the lines of, oh, and this is from a review of Good Girl Gone Bad of all things. I don't even know. Anyway, saying, now gender isn't pointless. It permeates every cell of our body. So really, give up the rhetoric. Science is written in stone. Your opinion isn't. How do you respond to that? Well, get a life, Karen.